I am Elena, and today, at 30 years old, I find myself on the threshold of a devastating truth. My home, this house I always believed to be my refuge, has become a prison of bitter memories. Here, within these walls, the story I am about to share unfolded. With me lives Sofía, my little 5-year-old, a whirlwind of laughter and curiosity. Her innocence is a beacon in the darkness that sometimes envelopes me. She is the reason I have found the strength to speak. There are also Ricardo and Marta, my adoptive parents, who took me in when I was a child. They always reminded me of the favor they did me, an invisible debt that weighed on my shoulders. Their love, if it ever existed, was always conditional. And then there's Javier, my adoptive brother, their biological son. He was always the center of their universe, the golden child. His word was law, his whims, commands. I, on the other hand, was the shadow, the perpetual guest in my own home. The house is large, with high ceilings and hallways that echo with every step. Every piece of furniture, every ornament, screams opulence and rigid control. It was a perfect setting for the farce we lived. Sofía, oblivious to the underlying tensions, used to fill the air with her joy. Her games in the living room were a symphony of imagination and small noises. For me, it was the sweetest music, but for Javier, her laughter was an intrusion, an annoying sound. He, at 32 years old, considered himself the absolute owner of every corner of this property. His temper was a ticking time bomb. My adoptive parents, Ricardo and Marta, always justified him. Javier needs peace for his studies, or, he's a genius, don't distract him, they would say with an indulgent smile. I was supposed to keep Sofía in line. The atmosphere in the home was a strange mix of luxury and repression. Sofía's laughter was the only dissonant note in their orchestra of silence and control. I tried to protect her, but my voice was small. I remember one particular afternoon, the sun filtering through the dining room windows. Sofía was playing with her dolls on the living room rug, whispering stories and laughing softly. It was such a pure sound. Javier was in his study, or so I thought. The house seemed calm, a deceptive calm that preceded the storm. My heart, unknowingly, was already beginning to beat with a premonition. My adoptive parents were in the kitchen, discussing some social event. Their voices were low, but their presence filled the space with an unshakable authority. I felt invisible. Sofía, in her own world, let out a louder laugh than usual. A laugh of pure happiness that resonated down the hallway. It was a vibrant, lively sound that broke the quiet. That instant, a shiver ran down my spine. It was the kind of laughter that, in this house, often brought consequences. My gaze fixed on Javier's study door, waiting, and then, the silence was broken in the most brutal way. A dry sound, followed by a muffled scream. The echo of Sofía's giggling transformed into a wail. I will never forget that. Sofía's laughter abruptly ceased, replaced by a whimper of pain. My heart stopped. I knew, with an icy certainty, that something terrible had happened. I ran towards the living room, my feet barely touching the ground. The image that appeared before my eyes froze me. Sofía was on the floor, her small cheek reddened, her hand over it. Javier stood before her, his face contorted with fury. His eyes, usually cold, burned with an intensity one had never seen in him. His hand was raised, as if he had just struck her. Too loud. Javier hissed, his voice barely a poisonous whisper. His words were like knives, piercing the air and my soul. I couldn't believe what my eyes were seeing. My adoptive parents, Ricardo and Marta, came out of the kitchen, drawn by the scream. Their faces showed a mixture of surprise and, strangely, something more. A kind of amusement. Instead of rushing to Sofía, instead of scolding Javier, they stopped. They looked at each other, and then, a slow, cruel smile spread across their lips, and then, the laughter. A dry, joyless laugh that echoed in the living room. It wasn't a nervous laugh, but one of genuine amusement, a tacit approval of Javier's action. Oh, Javier. Always so impatient, Marta said, in a tone that was meant to be reproving, but sounded like mockery. Ricardo nodded, his gaze fixed on my crying daughter. My mind refused to process it. Were they laughing? Were they really laughing while my daughter Their adopted granddaughter cried on the floor, hit by their son. Reality distorted, I knelt beside Sofía, hugging her tightly. Her small shoulders trembled. I felt a burning anger, a fury I had never experienced before, rise in my throat. "What did you do?" My voice was a hoarse whisper, barely recognizable. My eyes locked on Javier, then on Ricardo and Marta. I searched for an explanation, a shred of remorse, but there was nothing. Only that laughter, that echo of cruelty that filled the room. It was as if Sofía's pain was a spectacle for them, a confirmation of their power. Javier shrugged, with an expression of superiority. "Your daughter is a nuisance, Elena. She needs to learn to behave in this house. It's for her own good." My parents' words, their laughter, Javier's indifference. Everything came together in a painful revelation. This was not a family. It was a cage, and Sofía and I were trapped. In that moment, the world stopped. Sofía's innocence had been brutally desecrated, and my adoptive parents' response had broken the last thread of my faith in them. After that blow, the living room filled with a heavy silence, broken only by Sofía's sobs. My adoptive parents, with their petrified smiles, seemed like statues of indifference. Javier walked away, as if the incident didn't concern him. His disdain was palpable, another layer in the oppressive atmosphere of the house. My daughter trembled. In my arms, I tried to calm her, stroking her hair, whispering words of comfort. But my own voice sounded hollow, choked by the disbelief and pain that overwhelmed me. My parents, Ricardo and Marta, finally moved. Not to help, but to sit on the sofa, observing the scene with disturbing calm. Their eyes judged me. "Elena, don't make a drama out of this," Marta said, her voice soft but cutting. "Javier just taught her a lesson. Your daughter is too spoiled. She needs discipline." Ricardo nodded, lighting a cigarette with exasperating calm. "Yes, Elena. It's not a big deal. Kids fall, they get hurt. It's part of growing up. Don't make her a victim." Their words were a slow poison, trying to minimize the abuse, justify the violence. But the red mark on Sofía's cheek was undeniable proof of the cruelty. I stood up, holding Sofía with one arm, my other fist clenched. "It's not a lesson. He hit her." "How can you say that? She's your granddaughter." My voice rose. Full of despair, Javier returned, with an annoyed expression. "Shut up, Elena. You're giving me a headache. If you can't control your daughter, maybe you should lock her in her room." My parents did not intervene. In fact, their gazes fell on me with a chilling coldness. It was a warning, a silent threat to make me shut up. That instant, I felt the weight of years of their contempt. The way they had always treated me as a burden, an intruder. This incident was just the culmination of their cruelty. The house, which was once a symbol of security, transformed into a battlefield. Every corner, every shadow, seemed to whisper the truth of their betrayal. I was alone. I took Sofía to her room, closing the door behind us. I hugged her tightly, feeling her small heartbeats against my chest. Her pain was my pain, multiplied. As she calmed down, my thoughts swirled. My adoptive parents' laughter, Javier's indifference. It wasn't an accident, it was a manifestation of their true nature. That night, as Sofía slept, I looked at her angelic face. The mark on her cheek was a constant reminder. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't stay. I had to protect us. The morning after the incident, the house awoke with a tense, artificial calm. My adoptive parents moved with chilling normalcy, as if nothing had happened. Javier, with his usual arrogance, ate breakfast in silence, ignoring my presence. Sofía clung to me, her eyes wide and cautious, still frightened by what had happened. The atmosphere was dense, charged with unspoken words. My parents maintained a facade of perfection, as if their home were a sanctuary of peace, and we, the only disruptors. I remember how, ever since I arrived at this house as a child, they always strived to maintain that image. An impeccable, wealthy family, respected in the community. The truth was different. Javier was always the model son, the brilliant student, the future heir. His mistakes were invisible to them, his whims, justified. I was always the poor adopted girl. My presence was an act of charity for them, a constant reminder of my humble origin. They instilled in me the idea that I should be grateful for every crumb of their supposed kindness. Sofía, with her natural vivacity, never fit into their mold of a well-behaved girl. Her laughter, her games, her energy, were seen as disrespect, a challenge to their order. The house was a stage, and we, the actors in their play. Every interaction, every word, was designed to maintain the illusion of a happy, harmonious family, but Javier's slap to Sofía, and my parents' laughter, had torn the veil. Perfection was a mask, and behind it, cruelty and contempt hid. I felt trapped in a labyrinth of lies and manipulations. Every false smile, every condescending comment, now took on a new and sinister meaning. I watched Sofía, so vulnerable, so dependent on me. I couldn't allow her to grow up in this toxic environment, under the shadow of Javier's cruelty and her grandparents' indifference. The house, with its luxurious furniture and artwork, felt cold and empty. It was a mausoleum of repressed emotions, a monument to falsehood. I needed to escape, but how? I had no resources of my own, no support network outside these walls. My entire life had been controlled by them, my decisions, limited. The question echoed in my mind, how to break the mask of their perfection and expose the truth. I knew it would be a battle, but for Sofía, I was willing to fight. The tension in the air was a constant reminder of the latent threat. The house, my home, had become the battlefield of a silent war, and I, the sole defender of my daughter. The incident with Sofía was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of years of psychological and emotional abuse. My childhood in this house was marked by subtle cruelty. Since I arrived, a scared child, my adoptive parents made me feel like a burden. Every gift, every meal, came with the price of eternal gratitude and submission. Javier, their biological son, was the untouchable prince. His mischief was just kid stuff, his tantrums, temperament. My mistakes, however, were character flaws, proof of my bad blood. I remember once, as a child, I accidentally broke a vase. My parents made me feel as if I had committed an unforgivable crime. Javier, on the other hand, often broke things and was excused. They taught me to be invisible, to make no noise, to ask for nothing. My voice was silenced, my dreams, repressed. The house was a place of unwritten rules, designed to keep me small. The comparison with Javier was constant. Look at Javier, so smart, so diligent. Why can't you be like him, Elena? Their words pierced like needles. My self-esteem crumbled with every comment, every look of disapproval. I learned to tiptoe, to speak in whispers, to disappear into the corners of the house. The house, with its vast spaces, felt claustrophobic. Every room was a reminder of my insignificance, every hallway, a path to loneliness. My adoptive parents cultivated an impeccable public image. They were philanthropists, pillars of the community. No one would suspect the darkness hidden behind their closed doors. Sofía's laughter, so free and spontaneous, was a challenge to that facade. She was everything I had been forced to suppress: joy, noise, life, and that's why Javier hated her. Because she was a mirror of my own soul, a reminder of the life they tried to stifle in me. The slap to Sofía was an echo of all the times I felt my soul being hit. My parents' laughter, a confirmation that their cruelty knew no bounds, but this time, it wasn't just my pain. It was my daughter's pain, a pain I would not allow to be repeated. The invisible scars of my past pushed me to act. The house had become a battlefield where the war between oppression and freedom was being fought. I, with my daughter in my arms, refused to be another victim. This time, silence would not be my answer. This time, the truth would come to light, no matter the cost. My past had prepared me for this fight. Javier, my adoptive parents' biological son, was the center of their universe. From a young age, he was the prince of the house, and his word, law. His education was impeccable, his whims, commands. He was never denied anything, never corrected for a mistake. It created an arrogance in him that made him untouchable. Why? Parents idolized him, blind to his flaws, deaf to his manipulations. He was their legacy, their pride, the reflection of their own perfection. Javier grew up with the conviction that the world revolved around him. The house was his kingdom, and all of us who lived in it, his subjects. His temper was volatile, but always justified by his parents. "He's a genius, geniuses are like that," or "he's under a lot of pressure," were their usual excuses. For me, Javier was a constant source of anxiety. His mood swings, his hurtful comments, his veiled contempt, were part of my daily life. That he enjoyed my submission, my invisibility. My presence was a reminder that he wasn't the only one in the house, and that deeply bothered him. Sofia's arrival intensified his resentment. A child, noisy and full of life, was an affront to his order and his need for absolute control. Sofía, with her laughter and games, represented everything Javier detested: spontaneity, joy, the innocence he never had. My parents, instead of mediating, reinforced his behavior. They sided with him, minimized his actions, and blamed me for not knowing how to control my daughter. The slap to Sofía was not an outburst of anger, but a manifestation of his power. A demonstration that he could do whatever he wanted, without consequences, and my parents' laughter, their tacit approval, was confirmation that Javier was untouchable. He was the Dark Prince, and they, his accomplices. The house was his castle, and Sofía and I were the prisoners. Every hallway, every room, resonated with Javier's authority and his parents' complicity, but this time, the Dark Prince had crossed a line. His act of violence had ignited a spark in me, a determination to break his chains. The house had become the stage for a battle for my daughter's freedom and my own. And I, the shadow, was ready to face the prince. After the incident, the house became a laboratory of observation for me. Every gesture, every word from my adoptive parents and Javier, was analyzed. The mask of perfection they had always maintained began to crack before my eyes. Their smiles, their comments, everything seemed tinged with hypocrisy. I started noticing patterns, small inconsistencies in their behavior. The way they looked at each other, the whispers in the corners, the doors closed as I passed. My mind, once clouded by forced gratitude, was now alert. The seeds of suspicion had been sown, and they were germinating rapidly. What else had they hidden from me? What other truths lay behind the facade of this perfect family? Curiosity turned into a necessity. I began to search, discreetly, for clues. In drawers, in papers they left in plain sight, in conversations they thought I wasn't listening to. The house, with its countless corners and secrets, became my silent accomplice. Every object, every document, could contain a piece of the puzzle. I observed Javier, his arrogance, his contempt. I wondered what else he was capable of, what other secrets he kept behind his genius facade. My parents, with their calculated calm, were the hardest to decipher. Their coldness was an impenetrable barrier, but I was determined to find a crack. I recalled past conversations, casual comments that meant nothing at the time. Now, in the light of suspicion, they took on an ominous meaning. The tension in the house was palpable, though only I felt it. It was as if the very air was charged with secrets, waiting to be discovered. Sofía, though recovering, remained cautious. Her innocent gaze, now a little sadder, was a constant reminder of why I was doing this. I didn't know what I would find, but the feeling that there was something more, something dark and hidden, drove me on. The slap to Sofía had opened my eyes. The house, which was once a place of self-imposed blindness, was now a playground for my mind. Every day, I got a little closer to the truth. The seeds of suspicion had grown into a leafy tree of determination. I was ready to unearth every secret, for Sofía's sake and my own. As suspicion transformed into an unbreakable conviction, we could not continue living like this. The house, once a refuge, was now a trap from which we had to escape. My mind began to draw up a plan, silent and methodical. Every step had to be calculated, every move, discreet, so as not to alert my captors. The first objective was information. I needed to understand their power, their weaknesses, and how to use them to my advantage. The house was my research field. I began to observe their routines, their schedules. When they left, when they were distracted, when I could move undetected. Every detail was crucial. My phone became a secret tool. Not for calling, but for documenting. Discreet photos, quick notes, voice recordings of casual conversations. I wasn't seeking confrontation yet, but evidence. Something I could use when the time came for the truth. Something irrefutable that would expose their cruelty. The house, with its apparent security, was the perfect place for my investigations. No one would suspect that the submissive Elena was plotting her escape. I focused on my parents' financial documents, the papers they sometimes left on the study table or in Javier's office. I discovered bank accounts I didn't know about, properties they didn't mention, and a spending pattern that didn't match the saver's image they projected. Javier, for his part, had his own secrets. His phone calls, his business meetings that seemed more like clandestine encounters. The tension inside me grew, but my face remained impassive. I was an actress in my own tragedy, waiting for the perfect moment for the grand finale. Sofía was my inspiration. Her innocence, her vulnerability, gave me the strength to go on. For her, I would break the chains of this house. Every night, while she slept, I reviewed my findings. The puzzle slowly came together, revealing a web of deception and abuse. The silent plan was taking shape. It would not be an escape, but a liberation. And the house, which had been my prison, would be the scene of my victory. I was ready for battle, armed with the truth and the determination of a mother protecting her daughter. The countdown had begun. The accumulation of evidence became my obsession. Every night, in the darkness of my room, I reviewed my findings, piecing together the puzzle. I discovered that my adoptive parents had not only emotionally manipulated me, but had also fraudulently managed my small inheritances. They had used my funds, and Sofía's, for their own purposes, investing them in Javier's businesses that seemed to be fronts for something more murky. The recorded conversations revealed their contempt for me and Sofía. They mocked my naivety, and that a burden we represented. Javier, for his part, was involved in dubious financial transactions. His studies were a cover for activities that bordered on illegality. The house, which once seemed a symbol of stability, was now a nest of secrets and deceit. Every wall, every corner, held a hidden truth. The revelation of their true intentions hit me with painful coldness. They were not only cruel, but also dishonest and exploitative. My heart tightened thinking of Sofía. If they discovered my investigations, what would they do? The fear was real, but my determination was greater. I needed an ally, someone outside the house who could help me process this information and act. But who could I trust? I remembered an old family friend, a retired lawyer, Dona Carmen, who had always been kind to me. Would she be my hope? I decided to take the risk. One night, while my parents and Javier slept, I sent a cryptic message to Dona Carmen, asking for an urgent meeting. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every day I felt closer to the truth, but also more exposed to danger. Sofía, oblivious to the storm brewing, remained my anchor. Her smile was a constant reminder of what was at stake. The truth, revealed in the shadow of the night, was darker than I ever imagined. But with it came clarity, the strength to act. The house, my prison, would become the scene of their downfall. And I, the silent victim, would transform into the bearer of justice. With the help of Dona Carmen, the lawyer, my plan took a legal direction. She guided me, explaining the steps and the risks. The house, which was once my prison, became my fortress. Every day, I felt stronger, more determined to face the truth. My adoptive parents and Javier continued with their lives, oblivious to the storm that was approaching. Their arrogance was their greatest weakness. One afternoon, I sat with them in the living room, the same place where Sofía had been hit. The atmosphere was tense, but this time, the tension came from me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm, without the tremor it used to have. Their gazes fell on me, a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Javier scoffed. "Now what, Elena? Another drama about your noisy daughter?" My parents smiled, expecting my submission, but I didn't flinch. "It's not a drama, Javier. It's the truth. And the truth, sometimes, is uncomfortable." My eyes swept over all three of them. I presented them, in a veiled way, some of the evidence I had gathered. Not directly, but through questions that only they would understand. "Do you remember my biological parents' inheritance?" I asked, watching their smiles fade. "Or Javier's investments in certain businesses?" Their faces paled. The calm they always maintained began to crack. Surprise transformed into a mixture of fear and rage. "What are you talking about, Elena?" Ricardo tried to sound authoritative, but his voice trembled. Marta stood up, nervous. "I'm talking about justice," I replied. my voice clear and resonant in the room. About the truth of how you've managed my life and Sofia's. Javier stood up, threateningly. Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. But his voice didn't have the same conviction as before. My parents, for the first time, did not defend him. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with panic. The mask of perfection had fallen, the silence in the room was deafening. It was no longer the silence of submission, but the silence that precedes a revelation. The house, a witness to years of abuse, was now the scene of their confrontation. And I, the victim, was the one holding the reins. The silent confrontation in the living room had opened a crack in their facade. The tension in the house became unbearable, palpable in every corner. My adoptive parents and Javier, once so sure of their impunity, now moved with nervous caution. The laughter had disappeared from their faces. Dona Carmen, my ally, began to move the legal pieces. The authorities were notified, and the official investigation was launched. The house became a center for interrogations and evidence collection. Every document, every bank account, every property was examined. The truth about my parents' fraudulent finances and Javier's illicit businesses began to come to light. The empire of lies was crumbling. The authorities discovered that my inheritances had not only been embezzled but had also been used to launder Javier's money. Javier's studies were a farce. His businesses were a network of scams that had been operating for years. With his parents' complicity, the house, which had been the center of their power, became the scene of their downfall. Every luxury, every ornament, now seemed like a mockery. My parents tried to deny everything, to manipulate the situation, but the evidence was overwhelming. Their smiles had transformed into grimaces of despair. Javier, the dark prince, found himself cornered. His arrogance vanished, replaced by fear. He was no longer untouchable. The house, which once echoed with their mocking laughter, was now filled with the echoes of their accusations and the sound of justice in motion. Sofía, though small, felt the change in the atmosphere. The tension dissipated, replaced by a sense of liberation she didn't yet understand. The collapse of their empire was slow and painful for them, but for me, it was a liberation. Every revelation was a step towards freedom. The house, my prison, was becoming the place of my victory. And I, the shadow, was transforming into the light of justice. The truth, once hidden, shone with blinding intensity, illuminating every dark corner of that house and our lives. The legal process was long and exhausting, but the truth prevailed. My adoptive parents and Javier were found guilty of fraud and embezzlement. Justice, though delayed, arrived. The house, the symbol of their power and my oppression, was seized and sold to compensate their victims. My inheritances were recovered, and with them, the possibility of a new beginning for Sofía and me. The house no longer had power over us. Javier faced the consequences of his actions, and my parents, public humiliation and legal repercussions. Their laughter had been extinguished forever. With the recovered funds, I bought a small house, modest, but full of light and hope. A true home, where Sofía's laughter would always be welcome. The old house, with its bitter memories, was left behind. Now, every corner of our new home resonated with joy and peace. Sofía flourished. Her eyes regained their sparkle, her laughter, its spontaneity. She felt safe, loved, free from the shadow of cruelty. I also transformed. The submissive and frightened woman gave way to a strong and empowered mother. My voice, once silenced, now resonated with confidence. Dona Carmen became an invaluable friend, a mentor. She helped me navigate the path to my financial and emotional independence. I established a foundation to help other women and children victims of domestic and financial abuse. My story became a beacon of hope. The house, now a distant memory, taught me an invaluable lesson. True wealth is not in material luxury, but in freedom and dignity. Sofía and I built a new life, far from toxicity, surrounded by love and respect. Every day was a dawn of freedom. Looking back, the blow to Sofía and my parents' laughter were the catalyst. What seemed like the end was the beginning of our liberation. If you are in a similar situation, remember, your worth is not defined by the cruelty of others. Truth always finds its way, and justice, its time. This is my story. A story of pain, but also of resilience, of justice, and of a mother's unbreakable strength.